Equalizer, I'm excited to welcome John P. Kelley. P. Kelley is someone who's worn a lot of hats. He started out in the Army Light Ranger Regiment, served overseas several times, and later moved into law enforcement. After his time in uniform, he didn't slow down. Instead, he built a business in construction and has gone out of his way to support fellow veterans in his community. From volunteering with organizations like GallantFew and Living Hope Equine Therapy to serving as a local council member, PK has always looked forward to give back. He brings real-world grit insight to our conversation about leadership and service, both in and out of the battlefield. PK, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the program, PK.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Really an honor to have you here today.
No, I've looked up to you and had a lot of good conversations with you over the past 6 to 8 months, and I just appreciate you having me on your show.
No, from one veteran to another, I always have a lot of admiration for the Special Forces, the Rangers, and my military veterans, brothers and sisters. Tell us a little bit about PK. How did you get started in the military? Where did you go to high school? A little bit about your background.
Well, so I grew up in Texas. I finished high school actually at a college prep school called Hargrave Military Academy in Southern Virginia. And I wrestled. I was a decent athlete and wrestled throughout high school and really for 13 years of my childhood. So most of my life I was in wrestling. And then at Hargrave, my couple of my coaches and one in particular, but three of my mentors there all spent time in special operations. And I really had a really big desire due to them and others to after 9/11 to go directly into the special operations community.
How old were you when you joined the Army?
I had just turned 18, so it was about 4 months after, 19. It was about 3 months after I turned 19.
And you had just graduated high school. You went and took the ASVAB for the people. That's the military entrance examination. And did you sign up straight for the infantry, or what was your MOS when you first joined?
I did. I actually joined to be a medic with a Ranger contract and went straight through training and everything. And then after RIP at the time, which is the Ranger Indoctrination Program, they had a really big backlog at the time to go to the 18 Delta course at Fort Bragg. And so I reclassed to infantry at that time just to continue on with my career. Otherwise, I would have had to sit at RIP, what was called RIP Hold at the time, and be a medic for the Ranger Indoctrination Program in the crappy old barracks that were at Fort Benning that were built however long ago. And that didn't sound like a good time. So I decided to go ahead and reclass.
That sounds good. And what had the strongest impact on your decision to serve in the U.S. Army Ranger Regiment?
So those same mentors from Hargrave, I asked due to their experiences in special operations, and they served in the Marine Corps and the precursor to what is now the Marine Raider program, which was
the Marine Recons.
They're right. They were the recons. So the president of the school was Colonel Wheeler Baker, and he's considered one of the godfathers of Force Recon. Him and Colonel Ripley, John Ripley. Yeah, there's a great book called The Bridget Dong Ha, and it's written about Colonel Ripley. But those two guys but I asked the other mentors, my wrestling coach and the other mentors, and said, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently? And they said they would go into the Ranger Regiment. So I said, all right.
All right. In what ways did your special operations background shape how you see national security today?
Oh man, it's a good question. I would say it's kind of everything. Due to the fact that special operations, we directly deal with asymmetric warfare threats on a consistent basis, whereas conventional forces don't. They don't deal in that world hardly at all. And so, for me, it really is the basis of how I go about thinking, and not just from a threat aspect, but from a problem solving aspect. What makes special operations unique is they allow us the opportunity to think and to think outside the box. They want us to be outside the box problem solvers, and that's really how I go about it. Is what can we do differently that the enemy is not expecting in order to solve this problem? Because everything that's conventional or that they think we're going to do, they have already thought about it. So we have to come up with different solutions that are outside the box in order to combat the threats. Otherwise, same thing's going to continue to happen.
And also in the Ranger Battalion or Special Forces units, it is not a one-person mission. It's a team effort. Explain to us how that culture gets built from the inception, in the training.
And that goes all the way back to like going through the selection process. They completely break, kind of like basic training on steroids. They completely break you down individually, and then they build you back up as a team and as a unit. Whether that's you working as a small 2-man team or 3-man team, all the way up to a full company size, battalion sized element. It's all, what are you going to do to assist the team? So every day or whenever we would do log runs or whatever, I am not a tall person. In fact, I'm very short. And so I'm so short that if the team was carrying the logs, the log wouldn't sit on my shoulders like it would everybody else's. So what did I do? I carried the 2 5-gallon jugs of water for everybody on the log runs because I couldn't carry my weight on the log. So that was my way of contributing to the team. They break it down that simply. So it sounds ridiculous, but in order to pull your weight, those are the types of things that they instill in you from the get-go.
And what was the most profound lesson you learned moving from the military into law enforcement once you got out of the military?
Attention to detail. Probably is by far, and I know that sounds super vague, but when I mean attention to detail is if in law enforcement, if something doesn't seem right, it's usually not right. And so in order to take that a step further, good officers are going to dig and see what's not right. They're not just going to kind of let it slide or whatever. And that's where we're at today, where officers aren't prepared, is they're not being trained or taught. When you have that, when something doesn't feel right or you see something that's a little bit off, ask the questions. Why is this here? It's as simple as asking, because if they're not going to give you an answer that makes sense, then it doesn't. And so you have to be able to put those pieces to that puzzle together. And if the puzzle pieces aren't fitting, there's a reason for it. And that is asymmetric warfare in a nutshell.
Right. How did your time as a police officer deepen your understanding of threats at both the local and national levels as you see the situation that is escalating in today's world?
Well, on a very small scale, if everything is starting at a local community level, and then it's expanding outward, and then they're connecting the dots, right? They're connecting to each other, but it all starts at a very localized level. And then where our law enforcement and our intelligence communities are failing is they aren't connecting the dots. So in order for the officers have to be putting in very great detail of what's happening, whether it's at a university or at a innovative technology company or at a defense contractor business, and they see something out of place and they're doing a report on it, whatever it may be. It could be something simple, but those simple things are what turn into the big things. The best cases in the world never started out because somebody made some huge mistake. These are professionals. And so it's the little things, those minute details are what, and when those dots get connected, that's when the big cases break.
Which skills from your military career you will find vital in your consulting work in Homeland Security today?
Probably it's a multitude of experiences, but probably from a leadership aspect, and the leaders that I had around me at the time when I was in Ranger Battalion, really has to do with how I was brought up to think, not just outside the box, but really sitting back and listening first, understanding whoever it is that I'm coming from or working with on a consulting standpoint, is listening to what their problems are so I can best understand how I can help them moving forward. But sitting back and listening, versus you'll hear a lot of leaders or people in leadership positions will jump to conclusions versus actually taking in the information that they're being told.
What inspired you to launch Orange Diamond Consulting Group, and how does your method stand out in comparison with other companies that are out there?
So this came about over a period of time, but ultimately it came out of the Afghan withdrawal. And I took part of that as a civilian. Me and other operators got together, and one of my right-hand guys now, Mike Edwards, phenomenal human being, a true Ranger's Ranger, spent time in Ranger Reconnaissance Company, which is the Ranger Regiment's Tier 1 asset. Just a phenomenal operator, Silver Star recipient. He stood up Project Exodus Relief during the Afghan withdrawal and asked me to assist him, and we were, it was really amazing. So and what I mean by that is, during the withdrawal, we got to see what operators could do by still conducting work as a team, but we didn't have bureaucracy standing in our way. And we were just able to get things done and get them done quickly and efficiently, and still to the standard that we all know to be true and correct. And that's ultimately what really drove me to do this. Was there was a need, and then we had the people to fulfill the need, and we know what the standard is. So now it's just saying, hey, here's the problem, here's a plausible solution. But I believe in bottom-up leadership, because I don't think that problems can get solved effectively or very efficiently and where it's strictly top-down leadership, which is what you mostly see in corporate America, or even in DC and in government in general. As you see this top-down, this trickle-down effect of leadership, and I don't think that that's necessarily the right way to go about it. I want the lowest levels to be able to provide solutions to the problems that they're facing on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Do you believe leaders should have a full door policy, open door policy with their subordinates?
Absolutely.
What drives your personal mission as a leader, within the realm of Homeland Security, because you go around trying to help different police departments and have a lot of meetings with different people in private industry?
Yeah. Honestly, it's just knowing. It's my knowledge of what's coming and what the intelligence is telling us. That's really my driver behind it, is knowing those facts and knowing that we have the capability to do something about it. And I feel like, if not us, then who? And that's as simply as I can state that.
What core values do you believe every Homeland Security professional should embody? And the reason I'm asking you this is because I have a problem. You have a lot of empty suits with big egos that believe that only what they think is what should be done, not keeping an open mind to better solutions or more outside of the box solutions.
There's a lot to that. But I think ultimately I would ask them to look in the mirror and say, how long have you been doing this? And I would say, how much progress have we actually made in regards of transnational crime or counterterrorism within the homeland, or in counter trafficking within the homeland? If you were to look at trafficking statistics of how many women and children have been rescued from sex trafficking rings, say just in the Southeast over the last 10 years, it's not very many. It's not very many cases that have been prosecuted. And so I would say that you trying to tell people that things have to be done this way or whatever it may be is the absolute wrong way to look, because I can show them the facts. The statistics speak for themselves. And I would say, is fentanyl better or worse? We've talked about recruiting problems ad nauseum for the past 8 years in the United States, how they've continued to trend essentially down. Well, the people that we wanted to recruit, statistically, they're dead, and they died from fentanyl. So, or some other potential drug overdose over the past, that same time period when fentanyl continued to rise, and then it kind of peaked, and now it's starting to fall again. But things haven't necessarily gotten better. No different than I would say, all right, Mr. Homeland Security agent, or police officer or administrator, if y'all are so good at everything, then why are we always 3 years behind the crime cycle? Why are we so far behind?
Right.
Otherwise,
one of the things that calls my attention is the playing with the statistics all over the United States and around the world.
right.
The reclassification of crimes, reclassification to make the numbers fit the political agenda of the mayors and the governors and the people in power, so they could get promoted and look good on TV. But in reality, it's not so.
Right. That's a huge issue. That's an integrity problem.
Okay, and here comes my question. How do integrity and service play into your work at Orange Diamond and in your advocacy for policy change?
I mean, it's everything. If we're not willing to stand for what and do the right thing, whether we're advising or consulting on stuff, or we're the ones in the field conducting operations, then if we can't, your word is quite literally everything in life, especially in the act of public service. Do politicians and other people lie on a daily basis? Absolutely. And I don't know why. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle or political affiliation. None of that matters. What matters is, why do the American people continue to buy into the BS of people lying to them and get away with it? When are we as American people just going to stand up for what's right, regardless of politics?
Right. In your own words, what does coverage of threats mean in today's homeland security field?
Oh man. There's so many out there that I would break it down into like 5 core aspects of threats. And those threats being primarily it starts with counterintelligence and intelligence gathering of those threats. So counterintelligence being in our university systems, and then in our industry. Getting into government for a foreign national is much harder than it is for them to get a job at a subcontractor for Lockheed Martin that's working on the F-35 program. And then if they have access to that computer system that's working on the F-35 program, then they have access to the F-35 computer system, or whichever variant of the F-35. It doesn't matter. Once they have access to one, they have access to all of them, because you can guarantee that same company is probably working on all 3 of them. And so I'm just using that as an example, but it starts there. And then from there you get into the cartels network, and then you get into the terrorism networks, because you start within the homeland and then you work your way out, right? Like, you don't want to, why start in Afghanistan or Iran or the Middle East, anywhere, and try to close the loop, when you want to start right here at home and expand outward from there. And so, but ultimately, all of those threats are connected, every single one of them. And so it doesn't matter if it's the cartels working in Canada or they're working in Latin America, because they're all linked back to China. And then all 3 of those are linked to terrorism in some form, whether it's Cartel del Solis in Venezuela, which is also linked to Hamas and Hezbollah, which is linked to Al-Qaeda, you name it, or ISIS-K, they're all linked. So you start here, you work your way out, and that's ultimately the way that I would classify coverage of threats is you have to start at home and then expand outward.
Of all of the current dangers, which national security threats are top priority for the U.S. right now?
China.
Between China and Latin America expansion of Chinese influence, Russian influence, and Iran influence in Latin America, don't you think that we have, as a country, neglected Latin America for such a long time that it's coming back to bite us?
Oh, 100%. Well, it's one of those things where, I think most Americans would agree that you wouldn't want to treat your neighbor poorly. And that's the way I feel about national security. I don't want to treat Canada poorly. I certainly don't want to treat Mexico and Latin America poorly. And I've wondered why it is that we've allowed Chinese expansion and influence throughout Latin America when it's our backyard. And I say that because why do we have all of this manufacturing that costs far more to ship across the Pacific Ocean? Think about how expansive that is and how expensive it is to get a ship that's not nuclear powered but driven by diesel across the Pacific versus being able to manufacture goods in Mexico or throughout Latin America, for that matter, to the south, and how much better that would be for all. Because if we're putting people to work in manufacturing, whatever the goods may be, doesn't matter, or we're helping them extract natural resources out of the rich fields that are throughout Latin America, how much better off would Latin America be today if we took that approach versus catering to the Chinese or to any of the other countries that a ton of U.S. based manufacturing is at. Like, I mean, that's where I'm at with it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense why we've put everything on China. Who cares? Like, I don't care about China. Like, I think they're bad.
One of the things about China is the amount of land near military bases in the United States that they have purchased over the years. The amount of real estate to launder billions of dollars of bad proceeds, narcotic proceeds, weapons proceeds, all types of criminal element that comes into the United States to be able to purchase this properties and this land. Do you think that there should be some form where the United States government doesn't allow land near military bases, especially, to be sold to the Chinese government?
Without question, I think that there's a multitude of things that need to be done. No different than why do we allow a Chinese bank to have locations within the United States? Because once those U.S. dollars are put into that Chinese bank, those are no longer going to be U.S. dollars. Like, it's gone. Like, they don't convert. They basically are utilizing U.S. dollars to buy gold with, essentially. And so once that is done, it's U.S. dollars gone out of our system forever. It's not coming back because they're not going to convert it to the yuan and then back to the dollar or anything like that. They're using it to assist in building bricks and whatever else. And yes, absolutely. When it comes to land, there should be, and I think it should go a step further. China has done a lot to get involved in legitimate businesses in Canada and in Latin America, to where they essentially have a majority ownership stake in those businesses. And any foreign entity should have a very thorough check on where those entities are located, who's behind them, all of that before they can just purchase property in America. And to take that a step further, it's not just about military installations and them using those as collection sites for signals intelligence or pictures or whatever it is they may be doing, but it's also about utilizing our soil, which they can contaminate our agriculture in that manner. They've done the same by buying up, essentially they bought up 80% of the U.S. pork market, which is a problem because they could poison the American people with our own food. And there's nothing we can do to stop it at this point.
Well, we saw it during the pandemic, that we were without supplies. We were dependent on them for everything.
Right.
The
pharmaceuticals.
The pharmaceuticals, the mask, everything, we were on hold because our stockpile was no longer there.
Right.
We ran out of a lot of stuff. I think that the United States needs to take control back on producing instead of allowing people to produce for them. I mean, that's just my view. And it's
I agree with you, and I would take it a step further and say if the majority of, which I would say it's the majority now, if the majority of manufacturing is done via robots in today's market, why does it matter if manufacturing is it that much cheaper to do it in China if it's mostly robots today? No, it's not. That doesn't make any sense. A robot in China costs the same as a robot in the United States. So why would we subject ourselves to having all of our manufacturing there? Like, it's not going to be any cheaper whether it's in the US or in Mexico or in Guatemala or in Brazil. It doesn't matter where that that manufacturing facility is located, you can't tell me that if 80% of manufacturing is done via robot, that all of it still has to be in China. It doesn't.
Yeah, let me ask you, what do you think is the most widespread misconception the public has about Homeland Security today?
I would say that the biggest misconception is that they think that things aren't happening because it's not reported. It's not in the news. It's not in mainstream media. So they don't think that things are going on around them when things are happening every day. The truth is probably every American citizen on a regular basis brushes by or talks to somebody in society that is not here for good reasons.
How have terrorist tactics shifted since 9/11, and how does this affect our ability to prevent future attacks? And the reason I'm asking you this is because I'm seeing a return of the competitive nature of law enforcement. DEA does not tell the FBI doesn't share with HSI, and so on. And it also includes regular police departments. Even though they do share some information, there is like a competitive nature. I have to do that case myself. Let's compartmentalize the information so nobody has access to it, and that's what led us to pre-9/11, and that's what led us to 9/11. And
right.
we're coming back to that.
I would say we're on the fast track to that. It's frustrating because we've talked about it ad nauseum. Like the state of Texas, for instance, has an obscene number of fusion centers. None of them are being utilized like they're supposed to be. They're not even, can't even really classify them as fusion centers, even though they call them that, because they don't talk to each other like they should. They're not actually fusing any data like they're designed to do. Because they don't know how to, ultimately, is what it comes down to. When it comes to federal agencies not talking, that's a leadership problem. That's all that. That's a leadership problem, because if the directives are sent down, and here's my belief, and this is why I'm writing a book about this, which is it's a operational concept plan for Homeland Security for the next 25 years. And the reason I'm doing this is because these problems, and I'm glad you brought this question up because it's like near and dear to my heart because it's such a huge issue. If we aren't talking to each other and everything's so siloed, for the same reasons, it is harder to catch people today. And you can argue that it may be easier because so many things are digitized and all those different factors. That's all well and good. Except for the fact that over the past 4 years, we had a completely wide open border, and the bad actors of the world used that. They most certainly used it. And so they're here. They are 100% here. Al-Qaeda has between 1,000 and 1,500 fighters in the United States currently, in teams or cells that are as small as 12 to 25 people per cell. So you do the math. Think about how many cells that is located around the country. And guess what? None of those cells know who the other cells are. They're completely separated. So that way, any directives they're getting, they have no idea who each other are. So if we catch one cell, that means there's still potential for 75 or more other cells to be out there. And so that's the danger.
Where do you spot the biggest weak points in the U.S. critical infrastructure today?
Our electrical grid being one of them, by far. And I'll speak to Texas on this because it's what I know the most right now when it comes to the grid. But companies across the United States, because of the capitalistic nature of our economy, in order for companies to be able to maximize their profits, we have allowed, for whatever reason, and this is where it gets into legislation and intelligence, and we have allowed companies that work on those critical infrastructure to purchase, doesn't matter if it's hardware or if it's a transformer, or anything to do with an electrical substation anywhere throughout the country, but particularly here in Texas. A lot of those parts for these places have come from China. If in any way, shape, or form those parts are connected to the internet, not just to the grid, but if they're controlled wirelessly from a central hub or central control station, if you will, then guess what? They built a back door into that. And so now China has direct access to that, and they can literally, with a flip of a switch, shut our lights off if they really wanted to. And so until we locate and shut down those back doors, then we're in trouble. We're in big trouble.
Let me ask you, what do you view as the right balance between security and protecting civil liberties as new threats emerge on a daily basis?
Well, I think there's two different things that have to happen. I think legislation has to be passed to where, and the American people have to say, would we rather be safe or have 100% privacy? That's a debate, and I don't think I'm the right one to necessarily answer that question, but I think you can do both. I think it's doable. And where I say that that's doable is if non-citizens do not have the same rights that citizens of the United States do, regardless of what debates have gone on out there, they do not. It is clear in the Constitution that non-citizens do not have the same rights that American citizens do, period. Otherwise, what does our citizenship actually mean? They can vote. Non-citizens it's clear that they've been voting, especially in Democrat-held areas. It's clear. They get an ID, they go vote. Well, what does our citizenship mean at that point? It means nothing.
Right. And I tell you because I sent you an article today regarding an individual that became a police officer, a sworn police officer.
Right. Yeah.
He went through the background. I don't know what background they conducted. And he passed the background, graduated the police academy, and then he's working as a police officer. It's not until he goes to purchase a weapon at a store
in another state,
right, that he's not even a resident green card holder, that he's here illegally.
Right.
How was that? Who conducted those backgrounds? So, and the reason I'm saying this is because here you have, everybody in Washington, the president and his entire staff, trying to clean up the mess left by the former administration, where they had uncontrollable borders, open borders, and they allowed not only good people, but a lot of criminals, a lot of terrorists, a lot of different people that came here with the wrong intentions, right? And here we have supposedly somebody that is going to become a police officer to protect the citizens, but he himself is here illegally.
Right. All right. I'm curious as to how he took the oath. Because of what it says in the oath, right?
Right.
And you and I both being former law enforcement officers, we're very well aware of what it states in that oath. Because it doesn't matter what agency you're in, they're very similar across the country, with the exception of a few words and what department you're at. But it's a slap in the face to every person that's put on the badge, whether it's federal or local or state agencies. It truly is. It's appalling. And it makes you really wonder not only who did the background checks on these individuals, but like if you're a citizen of that town in Maine, or you live in Maine, period, you're sitting there wondering what's going on here. Like, why? How is this even? Like, I would be wanting to ask the mayor of that town and who appointed that chief of police. I'd be wanting to ask those questions. Like, how did this get by? Like, who are you hiring to do your background? Are you doing your background internally? If so, we have other questions for you. And ultimately, this, if you were just to do very quick math on the amount of people that came in over the past 4 years and bad actors and not just terrorists or, cartel members, whatever you want to call various actors, but criminals in general, just people that aren't here for good reasons. Take 10%, just a simple 10%. We haven't even scratched the surface of reaching 10% yet. And we're approaching 3/4 of the way into the year. And we haven't deported hardly anybody, if you look at the grand scheme of things.
Right. And one of the things that keeps me up at night, and that was my next question to you. What keeps you up at night when you look at what's going on in the country today?
Oh man. A number of things do. Ultimately I sit there and I look at cases like the things that keep me up at night are when our innocent civilians, like the young college student in Georgia that was killed by the TDA member, those are the things that keep me up at night. How many of these people or how many American citizens have to suffer while we quite literally sit back and are allowing people to run amok in our country, like quite literally run amok. They're literally sucking the life out of the American people from a tax dollar standpoint. It's one thing if you come here and you get into the workforce and you're here to pay taxes and do your thing and for the betterment of society. It's a totally another thing if you're here to live off the government, commit crimes after crime, violent, the majority of them violent crimes, and just be a disruption. That's a problem. And again, politics aside, anybody that's willing to like go to some of these countries that these people have come from, and if you really want to live that way, then go. You leave. If you're okay with all of these people coming here that have these crime problems, then why the majority of people are going to say no? Well, we actually kind of like it, the way we had it, and we're super fortunate here in the United States. I tell people all the time, just the mere fact that you were born in the United States, you're very, very fortunate. For all of us that have seen other parts of the world, and that's the part of the big problem. America is so culturally, we are far behind understanding what the rest of the world is like and understanding how good we truly have it, because most Americans aren't exposed to how bad it really is in other parts of the world. And that's a problem. The stories aren't told. The stories of the good people that come here that have done it the right way, like your family, and I can think of countless others that I'm friends with that their family truly suffered hardship to get it done and do it the right way, versus just, oh, come on across, we'll take care of you. And then it's a slap in the face to families like yours, comparatively speaking, and the American people just don't understand that.
Right. How important are public partnerships in protecting vital infrastructure?
Oh man, another good one. Well, the government can't do it on its own. And look at this current administration. As quick as they are trying to get things done and push things down the field in terms of correcting a lot of issues, look how slow it is. Public-private partnerships are the only way things are going to progress. And why is that? Because we don't have bureaucracy standing in our way. I can send out a directive to say, get this done or make it happen, and it gets done quickly. I don't have to wait on 20 different mid to high level administrators that have been in government for 20 plus years for it to sit on the corner of their desk and wait for them to sign off on it before it gets past the next administrator. And next thing you know, 6-7 months has gone by before anything gets done.
How should agencies respond and evolve the pace of hybrid threats, cyber, biological, physical, and accelerates?
They have to embrace public-private partnerships in order to move forward, because they're going to continue to be way behind the 8 ball without doing so. It's that simple. It doesn't matter if it's Secretary Nome of DHS, ICE, Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, you name the agency, they all need very robust public-private partnerships. The CIA, all the intel agencies included, they need to trust in us to allow us to help springboard them to where they need to be. And I just don't know if the lifelong bureaucrats have it in them to be like, okay, we agree with that. Let's make it happen. I don't have any faith in the government at this point that they understand how dire the situation is.
Right. How has China collaboration with Venezuela altered the security picture for the U.S. in Latin America?
We'll start by saying it's evolved rapidly, and I think you would far faster than I think people thought it would. They pulled a fast one on us with that, and we weren't prepared for it, and are still playing catch up from that standpoint. And it's like taking a fire that's already been burning and dousing diesel fuel on it. That's the type of accelerant that it was. And from a threat perspective, it's such a dynamic situation due to the Venezuelan and Maduro's regime's connections to not just China, but Iran, and then Iran controlling Hezbollah and Hamas. It just makes that such a dynamic and situation that our agents and our intel agencies, they only have to get it right once. Like, let's think about that. They only have to get it really right just once in order to really, really hurt us and change the game forever. We have to be right every single time. And that's where I think that agencies aren't, going back to not talking to each other and playing this ego game and this pride game. All they have to do is get it right once. 9/11, they got right once, and it changed life and cost a lot of American lives, not just on 9/11, but every American life that was lost in Iraq and Afghanistan as a direct result of the lives that were lost on 9/11, and a direct result of federal agencies not doing their damn job, ultimately.
The president's mandate for immigration arrests and deportation of illegal aliens has put a strength on federal agencies by taking agents that are necessary for counterterrorism, counterintelligence, investigations that are taken from those jobs that are, you can't play with that. Meaning
Right.
there are jobs that you cannot touch because then we drop in the entire bowl and we're leaving ourselves exposed. Do you think that they should utilize people, hire new people just to do these raids and arrests instead of removing people with decades of experience in the field that you cannot train somebody new just out of the academy to take over that slack?
I would take that a step further, and if they were to have hired everybody that they possibly needed to on the date of all on inauguration day, going back January 20th, if they hired every single agent they needed to in order to get the job done over the next 4 years, the hiring process is so slow from the time that they hire them to the time that they are on their own and doing their job without being babysat by another officer, another agent, and get out of the probationary period and field training time after the academy. It's too slow. It's 3 years, 2 to 3 years minimum. So in order for the president's directive needs to change. It's not possible for them to do what they're doing without us having a major attack on the homeland. It's just not possible. That we don't have enough agents currently. They have to embrace public-private partnerships and utilize, with a very narrow scope, utilize guys that are cleared and that are already trained, especially the special operations community. The government spent millions of dollars training each one of us. Use us.
That's one of the questions that I was going to ask you. There's been a lot of talk of guys that leave the special operations community and then get recruited or enticed by money, including the Mexican cartels and criminal organizations worldwide.
Right.
What can we do better to retain these people within the service instead of just letting them leave?
Well, we have to stop treating people like a number, and we can start there. Once somebody has decided to ETS and leave the military from special operations, things have changed a lot since I was in, but at the time, I mean, you were basically discarded as trash. Doesn't mean you were ostracized from the community or anything, but you were not thought of anymore as someone we're going to spend any time or take care of, whatever. Well, part of the reason for going back to your one of the first questions is you said, why did I start Orange Diamond? To give guys an opportunity to still serve the country, but in a public-private type setting where you can earn a good living, you can still be the patriot, you can still be of service, which I believe that once it's ingrained in us, whether it's in the military or law enforcement, or you're like us and you did both, like once it's ingrained in you, it's not, you've got to do something to fulfill that in order to live a truly happy and fulfilling life for yourself. With organizations like mine and others that offer these opportunities, you not only get to provide for your family, get to spend more time with them, but you also get to do that duty and service and still be a part of something that's far greater than any one of us. Me starting this organization has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with creating impact and for the community that in the state and the country. has very little to do with me actually at all, besides feeling called to do it.
Let me ask you, how has the reduction of U.S. influence in parts of the region affected the counterintelligence and counter-terror operations?
Let's use Afghanistan for that example as well. I'll tie the two together. So our failure to lead in the way that we left Afghanistan versus leaving, allowing the opportunity for us to have some sort of contingency there, but just up and leaving, that left a huge void. We had zero. There's only organizations like ours and some other private organizations where we still talk to people in Afghanistan, and we're gathering information that is far different than what the government is getting through the GDI from the Taliban. And the government has forced themselves into situations, and the same is true in Africa, because that's also been a forgotten spot for the past 4 to 5 years, where it was just kind of left on the back burner. Well, guess what? China and Russia went in there and cleaned our slate to the point that we were kicked out of countries militarily, which also, when that happens, there goes our intelligence assets, everything that goes with it. And same things happened in Central America and Latin America, greater Latin America as a whole, where China has stepped in to fill the void. And if we don't have influence there, well, we lose partnerships, whether that's in the law enforcement community or the intelligence community, or then where are we going to get our information? The only other way we're going to get it is through other public-private partnerships or through partnerships with specific non-government organizations, NGOs, nonprofits, things of that nature. And, like, where are we getting our information on Venezuela right now? You and I know the answer to that, but the American people don't. The government doesn't know where they're getting it. It's certainly not through good means, right? Like, we have people that we know are giving the government quite literally the opposite of what is factual and true in regard to what's happening in Venezuela.
No, the problem is that if you do have good information and good intel, who do you bring it to?
Right.
Egos won't allow you to have a conversation of any type.
Right.
And that is one of the problems that I see. What do you think is the most misunderstood about the nature of the Mexican cartels? Are they terrorist groups, proxies, or primary criminal entities?
It's a good question. I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is they don't really give a rip that they are classified as terrorist organizations. They don't care.
Right. And let me stop you right there. Sanctions don't work. I could put it, you could put me on the list as the biggest terrorist, you could indict me. If nobody's going to go after me,
right?
What does that mean? I mean, you saw in the Cartel de los Soles, they have indictments in different states, federal indictments for narcotic trafficking, for acting as a terrorist organization, for narco-terrorism, for money laundering, for all types of criminal mischief, right?
Yeah.
Now we took Tren de Aragua and we named them a transnational criminal terrorist organization. It took him months to realize that Tren de Aragua actually works for the Cartel de los Soles. Now they named Cartel de los Soles last week to be a narco-terrorist organization. Why don't we take Venezuela, that has a president that is illegitimate, that became a narco state, and name the entire country a narco-terrorist state? What is the problem with naming a country and being able to leverage against a country instead of reducing it to little organizations that could change name, that could vary, but what they cannot change is a country. You cannot change it.
Right.
You
Well, and
cannot.
I would go as far as to say the same thing about Mexico. It's a good question. Why don't they? It, I think that it's hard to say exactly why they won't do it, outside of the fact that I think that there's always more balls in the air than what we necessarily know about. Even though we know a lot of them, I think geopolitical things have a lot to do with that. Is what are the implications if we did do that for Russia and for China and for our relationships with them? They're trying to solve problems in one place, like with Russia and Ukraine. If we did that, does that make that situation better or worse? If we do that, does that make things with China and Taiwan better or worse? And so maybe that has a lot to do with that. I don't know. All I can do is say that I agree with you in the fact that sanctions don't matter to these organizations when CJNG is laundering money left and right through tourist destinations and very specific resorts, particularly in Puerto Vallarta, that Orange Diamond, we happen to know where El Mencho is. Can I get anybody to pay attention to us?
Nobody will pay attention. It's like,
that's right. It's ridiculous.
You put 15 million on Maduro's head and on Diosdado Cabello's head, and he says at the bottom, anybody with information that leads us to know where we could arrest this, I could tell them where they are. I could tell them where they sleep. But who is going to make that valid? Who is going to go and get them? There's nobody. Right. They're always put in place. We cannot violate the sovereignty of another nation. But when does a nation stop being sovereign? If a nation has an illegitimate president, has an illegitimate government, and that government is fueled by narcotic trafficking and by criminal organizations and harboring terrorist organizations, as Venezuela has been doing for the longest.
Right.
25 years of them doing that.
Right. Why do we not treat it like North Korea?
Venezuela did what Pablo Escobar could not do, and it's to weaponize cocaine to destroy the United States in conjunction with the Mexican cartels that are operating in Latin America. People, I don't know if they live in a bubble or they don't understand that the Mexican cartels and all of those criminal organizations have operational offices in Latin America, specifically Colombia, Venezuela, in Ecuador, in that region.
Right.
So let me ask you something. Which policy changes do you see are most critical to disrupting connections between the cartels?
I think there's a number of them, but let's start with policies at the ports. When it comes to, to break it down in the simplest form, I'll kind of leave it at this, because I think this is a good way to allow people to think of it in a different way. And maybe some politicians and policymakers will actually hear this out. But if you were to break things down, warfare in its simplest form, how are wars won and lost? They aren't won because a commander gets killed or because you kill more troops than the other nation, right? Like we're seeing that play out in Ukraine. That's not how it happens. The problem is neither Russia nor Ukraine, and I'm using them as an example because it's ongoing and it's publicized far more than the cartels are. their supply chains are still open on both sides to the front lines, right? So they can get food, although limited, they can get it. They can get their drones, they can get their guns, they can get whatever people they have to the front lines to continue the fight, however limited those pushes may be. Well, in the transnational criminal world, the supply lines and the supply chain is wide open. We are doing nothing to cut those supply lines. That means that if I was a policymaker today, in order to cut the supply lines from the criminal organizations and what's happening, I would expand the U.S. Coast Guard's fleet, and I would have it to where they are shutting down any boat that moves and heads north from Mexico to Canada is going to get intercepted and it's going to get stopped, and or it's moving from China to Canada. I'm going to work with the Canadian government, and we're going to find these fentanyl precursors, and we're going to start to shut these things down. And until the supply lines are cut, things are never going to change. It is that simple. Supply lines have to be cut.
This concludes our interview for today, and I'm inviting you back for a second part to this interview.
Sounds good.
That wraps up today's episode of Equalizer. A huge thank you to our guest, John P. Kelley, for sharing his powerful insight, his service, and his continued commitment to leadership and community. To our listeners, thank you for spending your time with us. If you enjoy the conversation and want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, and tune in to our live radio show every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Big thanks to our production team for making this all happen behind the scenes. We couldn't do it without you. We'll see you next time. Stay strong, stay curious, and keep pushing forward. Thank you. God bless.